Yeah. Everyone got, you
You
good?
going to the gym or something?
No. I'm glad you talked, because this is gonna be an exchange back and forth. It's a workshop, so don't get shy once we start, because we will call on you.
I know the answer. I'm sorry.
There are no wrong answers. This is all about exchange. Okay, you can sit. You want to introduce me, brother?
Yes, it's my brother Greg Williams. He's gonna do a little, amen. He's gonna conduct a little,
I don't have anything in my nose. You sure?
Can't even see up your nose.
amen.
Good?
Yeah, you good, you good.
Your hair a little shiny, but.
I can do with the shiny. I'm good with the shiny. Matter of fact, you know what? Because he's gonna clown me later. He's gonna clown me later. I don't mind if I start shining after I go. But in the beginning, there might be a problem. Because after you leave, he will clown me. Yeah.
This is about critical thinking, y'all, all right?
Hold on. Please finish. No, finish. You sure? Anyone else? Water? You want to do your thing? We're good?
You're
Oh,
on.
you already turned me on.
Bro. Get the whole Monty.
As I lay in human waste consumed by the stench, flat on my back, chained to a splintered bench, wrench and a scream type I heard before, little girl being raped strikes to my core, in pain stained by the beast as she begs, little womb destroyed, blood down her legs, impregnate fate, with hate the demon marks, got a bell from hell, now food for sharks. All of my people who in and exhale, fail see the lies, locked in a jail, veil over eye, blind and don't see. Only thing changed, time and day be. Beat till I'm limp, some kind of sick, like by 100 fist boots, sticks and bricks. Drenched by some fluid, not a favorable sign. By the smell, it wasn't water, but the flammable kind. Poking bones, mangled flesh, saw kids on a perch of a building, realized demons came from church. Praising God, killing me. What's the catch? Before I said my prayer, in the air was a match. Drama thick as I'm shot in my arm, foot, and leg, blood spread. Beast cheer and hear me beg, wouldn't let me die faint for real, kind of fiendish. Demons for sport, cut off my penis. Don't have a word for pain so severe. Took my scrotum sack to use as souvenir. Heard snap on my neck, core hatred root. Release my body fluid, swung as strange fruit. All of my people who in and exhale, fail see the lies, locked in a jail. Veil over eye, blind and don't see. The only thing changed, time and day be. Road burn and return spin of the wheel. Fate seal, body, flesh, skin starts to peel. To the bone blacking out. Heard them laugh. Now my journey over, body split in half. 4-1 in the air, half landed hot. Cold, my blood and spirit bloodied up my spot. Heard death rattle, breath confirmed. Worst fear, sowing spirit slip away. Left with cold tear. Good afternoon. How's everyone?
Started like that, brother.
You gotta start off strong.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
For purposes of review, because for the last time I was here in front of you, I gave you a review of what we're going to be talking about today. Today we're going to be talking about critical thinking. And I don't know if you recall, I think most of you were here last time I was here, yes? When I did the review. You weren't here?
No.
Okay. So in the review, I introduced myself. My name is Greg Williams. I work part-time here at Mercer County College as a student success coach. And we went over the responsibilities of the student success coach. Yes, you remember? And most of you are aware of the success coaches and what they do for you. Full-time, I work for the state of New Jersey, as I said to you in the hallway. I'm a state investigator. We regulate the casinos. So anyone who works in the capacity from maintenance all the way up to owners of the casinos and those who service the casinos in various capacities have to be licensed. So we do the background investigations on them, financial and criminal, and it can take us anywhere in the world. So that was a little bit about myself. What I didn't do the last time when I previewed for you was what your instructor wanted me to do, was what I just did. So when, part of my education, I graduated from Mercer, then I matriculated to Howard University and graduated from Howard University with a degree from finance. At Howard, I was part of the first hip hop group out of Howard University called Defiant Giants. So that's what you heard, some of our style of hip hop, which is politically conscious, pro-black, if you will, but more so politically conscious. We were critically acclaimed, didn't sell, as they were saying, the hood, we went wood. She did. So we didn't sell a lot of records, but we did tour across the United States, overseas, Japan. We've been in magazines and books, TV, when we won awards for that type of consciousness that will make you think. So that's a little bit about myself. That's the preview, part of the preview that I gave to the class before. Now, as I mentioned just a little bit ago, we're gonna be doing a workshop on critical thinking and how that came about. Again, this is still part of the preview. I wanna bring you back up to speed. How it came about was years ago, I was doing college prep for a youth program at the James Kearney campus called Upper Bound. And a representative from Howard was at a college fair and I volunteered to help her. And then I brought back the information to the youth program and I passed it out to all the children. And the first question I asked them was, where's Howard University? Mind you, it was right in front of them. And none of them knew. The director got upset, he was screaming at him, I asked him not to scream at him, and at that moment it sparked the thought that our children don't know how to think critically. Now, they would go to school, they would get their high school diplomas, and they would get their degrees such as you will, but do you really know how to think? Do you know how to critically think? And then that further sparked me to say, I want to develop a workshop using information and ideologies and what I've been blessed with by different mentors, people, my big brother, to bless people with the same thing I've been blessed with. Because that's the only way we will change the world that we're living in which we don't like, since you have great speeches, all of you. And these are seeds that will help us to then properly apply this information by thinking. Does that make sense so far? Okay. So I developed a workshop, and what you will hear today, we will, in the elements of critical thinking, we will address education. As you see, that's why we have it on the board. We will talk about education. We will talk about how to create and ask questions in a definitive manner that will give you the critical answers that you need when you are critically thinking. And then what we're going to do, because part of the critical thinking workshop that I have is also the second part is cultural development. So what you see here are the 9 major people activities. We will get into that and I will go into them and tell you where I've gotten them from. And when I say culture, that is loosely how people present themselves to the world. We all relate to a culture. So these are elements that help to create your culture. And then lastly, what we will do is with this information, we will then apply it. Because what good is it for me to present it to you, us to discuss it, and we don't have applications on how it can work? Does that make sense so far? No, yes?
Yes.
Okay, they're better than the class yesterday. Yeah, I had to do my Mr. Ed impersonation, like the first thing, so them to pay attention. I almost did my gymnastics thing, the cartwheels. Then they woke up. No, they were good, but I had to wake them up because it was the morning time. All right, also in the preview what I did for this class, I actually did a quiz with them. And I don't know if you remember. Oh, okay, so I can go over briefly, some of you will. So, how I got the attention of the youth, because a lot of them will sit there and then, you know, they're posting up like, whatever, dog, whatever you're saying, I'm not feeling. So I had to get in, what do you mean I don't know who I am? What do you mean critical thinking? All of that. So what I asked them, I said, and I'm gonna do it with you. If I was to ask you, where do black people come from? You would say,
America. Oh, we did
America.
this.
You do remember.
Yes,
You would say,
yes.
say it, speak.
Yeah.
This is the time.
Oh.
Africa, America,
The hood.
the hood. If I was to ask you, where do Polish people come from? You would say,
Poland.
if I was to ask you where Italians come from, you would say,
Italy.
if I were to ask you where the Germans come from, you would say,
Germany.
if I were to ask you where black people come from, you would say,
Africa.
Africans come from Africa.
yes, you remember.
I remember. 'cause
You
she said it
remember.
last time.
Thank you. Did you, what's your name?
Mackenzie.
Mackenzie, and you said
I said Africa.
Africa.
She said America.
So, did you understand what was just said? Your name?
Oh, Rachna.
Rushna.
Rachna.
Please correct me if and when I mess it up. Rushna,
Rachna.
my friend, said, excuse me, said Africa. Africans come from Africa. Did you follow? When I said, where do black people come from? People said America, and so on and so forth. And my friend said, no, Africans come from Africa.
No.
No.
Mackenzie said.
Mackenzie said,
I said black people come
Come-
from.
Well,
You said black
last
people
time you
come
were
from
here,
Africa.
she said Africa, and then you corrected her and said,
Yes.
yeah, they,
I was.
Yes.
Africans came from Africa.
yes.
And I was just doing that for her.
Everyone with us? You with us? And the purpose was, and that was the preview, so now we're gonna go further since I've caught you up.
Because I think I see where you're going with that.
Where am
Or
I
at
going
least
with-
I went somewhere
Talk
else.
to me, talk to me.
Because even with saying Africans come from Africa, like Americans come from America, but Africa has so many, like it's Liberia, Nigeria, Morocco, there's so many different, like, African, yeah.
They're awake. I love it. This is good. I love it. Did you hear what Sister said? Yes. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
The purpose of the quiz is that everyone identifies with the landmass, right? There's no place called Black Land. That makes sense? And to take it further, I'm gonna switch up. Because I talking to my brother yesterday when we were just going over, critiquing what I did yesterday. Although I asked you where Germans came from and other groups came from, people came from, there's also no place called white land, yes? Now we're getting into critically thinking, right? Does that make sense? So when it comes to black people, we're like, I'm black, I'm black, I'm black, but you're not identifying with the landmass. And if I'm now injecting, people may say they're white, but they're like, I'm Italian, right? Because they can identify specifically to a landmass. Does that make sense? Right, because I'm just gonna mess with you, we're having fun. As Steve Rogers said, culture. There's culture that comes with the landmass and the people that can identify with that landmass. Now, correct me if I'm wrong, did I go into saying, using the term diaspora? Did you hear me say that? No, I didn't say that. Okay, good. The reason, now predominantly when I'm doing my workshops, they're for African American youth and Latino youth. And it's about empowerment. It's about to get them to critically think so that then they can take the data and the education, or as we will get into the miseducation that they receive, they can apply it to correct their own homes, neighborhoods, and such. Does that make sense? You with me? But since I'm in a diverse group, this also works because now we're all being educated and identifying the miseducation. Does that make sense? No? If it doesn't, say, man, this doesn't make sense, dude. It don't make sense, and then we can go further. but it doesn't. No, it's all good. It's all good. It's all good. Does it make sense?
Yeah.
Okay. So, identifying with the landmass because of culture, right? Yes? Okay. And as I spoke to them, and now that I had their attention, then I went into, because you kept hearing me say education, education. You've heard me say this multiple times, right? So now I will ask you, give me your definitions of education. What is it to be educated? To learn. To understand.
To have gone through structured schooling and
Say that louder, please.
to have gone through structured schooling and being taught a curriculum.
It's a very good answer. All of them are great. Anyone else? Critical thinking. Yeah, okay. I see what you're doing. Anyone else? Thank you. Anyone else? Those are good answers. Yes, yes.
I actually want to disagree with him. I feel like education isn't just straight curriculum. There's like education, like street smart and book smart. So
Ooh.
I think it goes further than just a curriculum.
Ooh.
Go ahead, Katrina.
Ooh.
I know that's right. That's the education.
It's all good. Is education the same as being trained or being taught? Kind of.
The initial phases of education is a training, but you're supposed to take it beyond and codify it and implement it to yourself, your life.
Ooh, I like that.
Got some
Yes.
educated people in here.
Anyone else? Anyone will follow that? That's a great answer. No one wants to follow that. So, great answers, thank you. So, if I was to ask you what is the first form of education, you would say what?
Family.
Family. Anyone else?
Like,
What you said?
The
Yes.
literally just watching your parents and like
Like
as
when you're a
baby,
baby, you
learning how
can
to
learn
speak,
how to
like,
walk, learn how to be
by
conscious
watching
of,
others
like,
around you
your
and what
family,
they do and how they act.
Great answers. I can incorporate all of those answers. I'm gonna incorporate what you just said in a simple statement. First form of education is knowledge of self. And you can get that from your parents.
Say itself or of self.
Of self, self, right? Because, does that make sense? Because that first form then becomes your foundation, like this ground, right? Because the analogy would be, this is the ground floor, and if I was to build on top of it and go 30 stories, if this foundation was faulty, what will happen? I can't hear you.
Fall apart.
I can't hear you.
It'll fall apart.
It'll fall apart. So, it doesn't matter how beautiful it is, if this is faulty, right, it's gonna fall apart, right? Yes?
Yeah.
I have to do my, yes?
Yeah.
Okay, Aisha? Yes. If my skin is ashy, it doesn't matter what clothes I put on top of it,
You're still gonna itch.
that foundation, that skin is gonna be jacked up. Make sense? Okay, I thought I would go for that because that was pretty cool. Okay, so we need to, first form of education is knowledge of self, right? And we already talked about how training is different from being educated, right?
Yes.
From the Latin root, to be educated means to bring forth out of. You with me? What am I bringing out of? The uniqueness of you, the individual. Each person is unique. And I may have said it in this class. If I didn't, I'll say it now. All of you are unique. There's no one like each of you, right? Which means that you should own who you are. So as you speak, as you've done with your speeches, you are presenting something to the world that no one else can present, like you. Make sense? First form of education, knowledge of self. You embrace it, right? And as you embrace it, then you grow within it, and you get confident in it. And to bring forth out of, to be educated, you get to the point where then you are now educating the rest of the world from your perspective. That makes sense? That's the purpose of true education. So there's a difference between someone who's an educator and who's an instructor or just a teacher, right? Because to be educated, follow me, to reach adulthood, to be educated into adulthood, you need to provide, defend, and protect yourself, your family, and your community. You with me? If you're not doing all three, then you're not an adult. And what got me on that path, one of my friends used to tell me years ago, yo, G, being a male is a biological fact. Manhood is learned behavior. You know, yeah, whatever, dog. But then it made sense. Because then when you apply what I just said to you, then it would make sense when you're doing observation. If you're 18 years old, in this country, you're an adult, considered. But we see that you're 18, you're just 18. That doesn't, what did you go through when you were 17 and 364 days, and then on the 365th day, now you're an adult. There was no rites of passage, as they do in other cultures, that will show and prove that you are now an adult, correct? And then that would make sense why we have those who are 30, 40, 50 who act like children, yes? Because they still are children, yes? Because they have not learned how to provide, defend, protect self, family, and community, right? We're critically thinking now, yes? You with me? You sure? Any questions? Any comments? Any solicitations? I just threw that in there for commercials. Okay, so, talked about education. This is a good group, brother. Yeah. We talked about education. We talked about the first form of education, right? Knowledge itself. We talked about that versus teaching or being taught, correct? I'll give you a quick analogy in reference to that. If I was to have a dog here, and I would tell the dog to roll over, play dead, speak, you heard people will say, well, that's a very smart dog. That's an educated dog. No, that's a trained dog. It's a well-trained dog. Provide, defend, protect, self, family, community, like, now I'm guessing. Who did my wolf? Who did the wolf speech?
Oh, no.
That wasn't someone
Oh,
else.
yes, the wolf speech, yes. Feel me? Okay. So, and you notice how I said who? Definite answer, yes? This is how you want to start your questions. This is how you want to start to form your questions. The reason I put why here, we don't use why. Because, like my analogy with the dog, I'll use it again. When you say why, or you start your questions with why, then you're like the dog chasing its tail in a circle. Because you know how you see the children, you give such a why, such a why, such a why. No matter how great the answer is, why. You don't go anywhere. So we don't use why. You with me? Okay. Let's move on. Forgive my bad. 9 major people activities. Now we're going to develop the culture, your foundation. These are called the 9 major people activities. Now I was first exposed to it from a professor who has since passed on, named Dr. Frances Cress Welsing. She was a professor out of Howard University. And she spoke on the 9 major people activities from a book she wrote called the ISIS Papers. Now, she received this information from her mentor. His name is Neely Fuller Jr. who wrote a book called The Compensatory Code. And what they say with the non-major people activities, these are activities that affect you every day, even if you don't even realize it. This is happening all the time. So, yes. No, please.
How come love isn't on there? Is that like interchangeable with sex, or is that something we don't engage in?
That is a great question. You can.
Can't you find love in all of those?
Yes,
I
yes.
feel like a lot of those things, like sex and war, like products of love, like in a way, like
So I just
you
could
love
be
someone
sex
so much,
without
like you're
love.
so mad that it causes you to go to war.
Hold on. I want to hit because you silly.
No, she's what?
No, I love the way she talked. That's why I'm saying she's silly. I want to hear. What's your name again?
Matt.
Matt. I want to hear what Matt is saying.
So like I feel like a lot of those are like a byproduct of love, and it's
Yes.
like law is like you defend what you love through the law, and it's like war is like kind of like a drastic way of defending what you love. It's like,
Everyone with that? I see a lot of head shaking. This is good. You guys are critically thinking. This is wonderful. I would say, I would agree with because I want to hear what you have to say, because I want to laugh too. what Matt is saying, because, like I said, non-major people activities, but there will be overlap. There will be things that you can attach to that. There will be things that you can combine with. And you're actually helping to move forward, actually, with the workshop in terms of using examples, because we're going to go into examples, and since you guys are swift, I want to throw some things out, because I want to hear how you think. And back to you, sis. What did you say?
Well, I'll tell.
Oh, you
shy.
can say, okay,
She said
she's
that-
shy.
Very shy.
I just said that like there could be sex without love, but there could be like all of these without love.
This is
Yeah.
true.
Yeah.
But
No, that's
I just
very
said
true.
it when you said it. So. And
That's
she
what
said,
you said.
she said, it sure can be.
Yeah, but to her point,
I initiated her comment.
She's like, mm-hmm.
you know, but to their point, all of these things can exist without love. Like law, yes, you can be defending the legal system because you love the law, but it exists because we're self-preserving ourselves. Because without law and order, we're Lord of the Flies. Or without politics, we don't have government. So it's not like we love something. It's we're trying to preserve ourselves. So love
Yes,
is
ma'am.
something that's
Yes.
I
Yes.
mean, like in a lot of ways, we're trying to preserve ourselves because we love living, because it's all we know.
like. I think so.
That's kind of how I look at it.
Now check this out. Let's keep it going. When you're engaging in a serious conversation or just engaging in conversation, you should define your terms, right?
Yeah.
Because we're saying love, but how you're defining love and how you're using it is the same as how Matt is using it.
Right.
So, and looking at Aisha, because you can't have sex without love. Maybe, I'm messing with you now. So then if we're talking relationships, and you're with your partner, I love you, but is the definition the same? I thought you loved me, I do, but I love you, I'm not in love with you.
I got love for you.
I got love for you,
But
but, oh,
We just
okay.
haven't
See,
said.
y'all not seeing what I'm seeing. Y'all not seeing what I'm seeing. I'm looking at faces down there like, ooh.
Oh, but yeah,
Right.
that's true. The fundamental problem in love is different definitions. Your interpretation of what it is different from someone else.
And a 17-year-old's interpretation is different from a 25.
Yeah.
So what you saying? Are you specifically calling someone out, or you just saying?
No, I'm just saying.
Because
it's
you
not-
pointed
it's
this
different.
way.
No, I'm just only calling out age differences, that's all.
Perspectives.
Yeah.
I understand what you're saying. It's food for thought, you know.
Mhm.
Like I don't have like the same experiences as
Right.
she
Right.
does.
So you were calling Matt out?
No, I'm
I'm teasing.
No.
I'm teasing you.
I know you know what love is.
Oh, there you go. Good recovery.
Love your mom.
Yes. Why you throwing shade? You know what? Okay. Yes.
To add on what she said and he said, I don't think it's the age, I think it's the experience.
Yeah.
So someone who is 17 might go through more than a 30-year-old. A 30-year-old could have had that high-level life, rich, had no worries. while a 17-year-old lived in poverty, so they could still experience